Hi, I'm Luther. I was supposed to be family, husband, son-in-law, a man with a place at the table. But that night, there was no chair for me, not a word, not a mistake. Deliberate. And when I looked at my wife, then she smirked and said, "Oh, no seat for the trash." Everyone laughed, even her father. So I walked out, calmly, quietly. 30 minutes later, they found out. The venue, canceled. The catering, gone. The band, packed up. Because the contracts were in my name, and they forgot that even ghosts can burn down a house. But the worst part, this wasn't the first betrayal, just the last one I stayed quiet for. So tell me, what do you do when your own family writes you out of the story, but still expects you to foot the bill? I walked into the event hall alone. The place had that kind of polished coldness. Chandeliers too bright, the carpet too clean. A jazz quartet murmured from the corner like they were trying not to disturb the expensive awkwardness of a Dorsey family gathering. Tables were dressed in ivory linen, silverware too shiny, wine glasses set with machine precision. Everyone was already there. Dorseys don't wait for anyone, especially not me. I paused near the entrance. My eyes did what they always do, scan for a place, not just a seat, but a place. That subtle hope you carry into every room, thinking maybe this time they'll remember you exist. The name cards were arranged like little tombstones. I saw Aunt Velma, Uncle Stuart, even Kenny, who hadn't shown up for a family thing in 6 years, had a seat. Then my eyes hit the last table. My name wasn't there, not a single damn card. I stood there trying not to blink too much. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe someone forgot. But then I saw her, Rowena. She was already seated next to her father at the head table, legs crossed, glass of wine in hand, that smirk she always wore when she knew she'd drawn blood without lifting a finger. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. Just loud enough for the people at her table, and quiet enough to sound like gossip. Oh, no seat for the trash, I guess. The room didn't go silent. That would have been mercy. No, it rippled. A few chuckles. One sharp laugh from her cousin Shane. Someone muttered, "Ouch," behind a napkin. Nobody looked surprised, like they'd rehearsed it. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. My hands stayed in my pockets. I felt the burn crawl up my chest, but I buried it deep. What got me wasn't just the insult. It was the way they all agreed with it. By not saying a damn word. My wife, my so-called family, a room full of adults letting silence do their dirty work. I turned away before the sting showed on my face. Off to the side, near the restrooms, I saw a chair. Just sitting there, forgotten. No cloth, no decoration. Half tucked against the wall like someone had started to move it and gave up halfway. Something about it hit harder than her words. Even an empty chair has more place here than me. I walked toward it. Not to sit, not to sulk, just to breathe. Just to have space that wasn't soaked in their smugness. I stood there, hands still in my pockets, back straight, forcing myself to breathe like I wasn't humiliated. Then I turned back to her, to them. Rowena caught my eye. She raised her glass slightly, like she was proud of her little moment, like this was another one of her private victories. I stepped forward just enough for her to hear me. My voice was calm, almost too soft. "Seems I'm not your husband." Her smirk faltered for a half second. That was enough. I didn't wait for a reply. Didn't look at Harlan, who hadn't said a word. The great patriarch, always too dignified to get his hands dirty, but never clean enough to stop it either. I walked past the buffet, past the photo booth, past the giant gold sign that read, "Congratulations, Harlan," like it meant something. No one followed. Outside, the night air was warmer than I expected. Houston spring. That kind of sticky stillness that clings to your skin like memory. I didn't have a plan yet, but the seed was planted. Let them sip their wine. Let them feel triumphant. They had no idea what I was already preparing. Canceling that party wasn't revenge at first. It was survival. It was instinct, like jerking your hand back from a flame. I stood just beyond the glass doors of the banquet hall where the air was thicker with pollen than tension. The music inside kept playing, muffled now, and every few seconds, a ripple of laughter slipped through. It stung more out here than it did in there. Out here, I had no witnesses, no one pretending they didn't hear what she said, no polite aunts avoiding eye contact, just me and my thoughts. I leaned against the stone column near the valet stand and stared at the asphalt. Still warm from the Texas sun, the concrete gave off that faint smell, like burnt rubber and old gum. I could see my car in the corner of the lot, tucked into a shadow like it knew to stay quiet too. I didn't light a cigarette. I quit 5 years ago, but my hand went to my chest anyway, like muscle memory was asking for one. I needed something to do, something to hold, because what I was holding inside was too damn much. It wasn't just the insult. It was everything behind it, and everything before. My head wandered to a night about 3 years ago, Thanksgiving. Harlan had insisted on hosting even though his knees were giving out, and Rowena wanted to show off the new dining set she'd picked out, paid with my bonus check. Though no one ever said that part out loud, they set the long table with 12 seats. I was 13th. You know what that means, right? They pulled a folding chair from the garage, put it by the patio door. No tablecloth, no napkin ring. Hell, I had to reach halfway across the table just to get a roll. And where was it placed? Next to the dog's crate. I still remember the way Aunt Velma laughed. Well, someone has to sit in the overflow section. They all thought it was a joke. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe it was just easier to pretend it was. That night I told myself, they're just oblivious. They don't mean it. But tonight wasn't oblivion. It was surgical. There were assigned seats, a seating chart, name cards printed and laminated. They planned this. Somebody removed my name. Someone made that decision. And Rowena? She delivered the line like she'd been waiting weeks to say it. I kept standing there, listening to the party go on behind me, thinking, how many years have I given these people? How many weekends? How many gifts bought, fences mended, tempers swallowed? And for what? For a seat? No. For the illusion of belonging. That's the part that hurt. I thought of all the times I stayed quiet for the sake of keeping the peace. When her brother called me soft in front of our friends. When her mom said I looked tired and underemployed at Christmas. When Rowena once told me, deadpan, "You're lucky I'm not into alpha men because you'd be screwed." I laughed along. I let them think I was harmless because being loud in that house made you dangerous. And being dangerous meant being excluded even more. But tonight, they excluded me anyway. So what the hell was I protecting? Is silence still noble when it only serves the people stepping on your throat? I turned to look back at the building. Through the tinted glass, I could see Rowena's silhouette, slender, confident, sipping from her wine glass like nothing happened, like she didn't just strip her husband of his dignity in front of an entire bloodline, and they all let her. The thought came quickly, like a match striking inside my chest. If they want me erased, then I'll erase this night from them. I didn't smile. I didn't breathe differently. I just reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone, thumbed through to the email confirmations, venue, catering, photographer, all booked under my name, my credit card, my information. She always said I was a boring control freak for handling logistics. Tonight, that made me the detonator. Inside the hall, someone raised a glass. I could hear muffled clinking, probably a toast in Harlan's honor. To the man who built it all. Built what exactly? A family business? Or a legacy of quiet cruelty dressed in good manners? My eyes flicked back to the contract for the catering company. The cancellation clause had a 24-hour window for full refunds. I was about to miss it. I hesitated. I imagined bursting back in, dragging that chair from the hallway to the middle of the room and sitting in it with a plate of food on my lap, just to make a point. But no, that would give them too much. Instead, I whispered out loud to no one, "This ends tonight." I climbed into my truck and shut the door behind me. The driver's seat creaked, familiar and worn, unlike the seat that never existed for me tonight. I sat still for a second, letting the cab go dark and quiet. Then I unlocked my phone. Every detail of that retirement party was in my name, and they had no idea. The venue, the caterer, the string quartet playing inside, the floral arrangements, the slideshow technician, even the photo booth in the corner with those goofy props Rowena insisted on. All of it, Booked, scheduled, paid by me. It started 3 months back. We were in the kitchen. Well, I was in the kitchen making coffee. Rowena was scrolling through Pinterest, flipping through centerpiece ideas like it was a wedding redo. "I need you to handle the boring stuff," she said without looking up. "You're good at that." No please, no suggestion, just delegation, like I was the help. I didn't push back. I thought maybe if I made it flawless, she'd finally look at me like someone worth showing off. Someone who earned a seat, not someone shoved to the back near the damn bathroom. I took that project seriously. I called vendors during lunch breaks, paid deposits from my personal checking account. I even used my cousin's connection to lock in the venue. 3 months of coordination, timelines, backup plans, all done without complaint. Why? Because I thought if I did everything right, they'd have to see me. Tonight proved how wrong I was. They didn't just ignore me, they erased me entirely. And as I sat in my truck, parked just 50 feet from their laughter, the weight of that betrayal pressed down harder than the steering wheel in my lap. I opened the email folder labeled Harlan's retirement. There it was, line by line, every confirmation, every invoice, every signature with my name. I scrolled to the catering contract first. 5-figure invoice, deposit paid by me. Cancellation, full refund with 1 hour notice. And I had time. Part of me paused. Was I really going to pull the plug on a party that technically I built? That's what made it so hard, because I wanted to be better. For years, I told myself that being the bigger man meant staying quiet, absorbing the hits, waiting for the long game. That's what we're told, right? Patience pays off. Silence earns respect. But what if all silence does is tell them they're right? What if every time I swallowed an insult, I gave them permission to treat me like less? Rowena's words echoed in my mind again. No seat for the trash. And they laughed. Not one person said, "That's too far." Not even Harlan, the man who once looked me in the eye and said, "You're part of this family now." That was a lie. They were never going to let me in. I looked out the window toward the building. I could see silhouettes moving through the curtains. People raising glasses. A slideshow must have started. I'd spent hours scanning old family photos for that thing, cropping, color correcting, syncing it to Harlan's favorite jazz records. I bet they didn't even notice. The urge rose in me again, not rage, but something colder, something quieter. A picture in my mind, me dragging a folding chair into that ballroom, placing it dead center under the spotlight, then taping every receipt to it, letting them see just how invisible I wasn't. But that would be for them. No, silence would cut deeper. Let them celebrate without knowing the floor beneath them was already shifting. I opened the PDF for the caterer. The cancel button stared back at me, bright blue. My thumb hovered. There was still a voice in my head. The old one. The peacemaker. "You'll cause a scene. You'll look bitter. You'll be the villain." But another voice answered, steady and sharp. "They already cast you as the villain. You might as well write your own ending." I took one more breath. Then I pressed call, and the first domino tipped. The caterer's voice was cheerful at first until I told him to stop everything. There was a beat of silence on the line. Then came the stammering. "Sir, I'm sorry, you want to cancel the whole thing right now?" I kept my tone even. "Yes. The name on the contract is Luther Dorsey. That's me. I'm canceling it." From the passenger seat, my binder of paperwork lay open. Contracts, payment receipts, contact names, all signed by me. The food was supposed to roll in at exactly 7:30. They still had 15 minutes. "But sir," the manager tried again, "we've already started loading the trucks. That deposit is non-refundable." "I'm aware. I mean, the whole family is depending on this," he added carefully, like trying not to offend a man with a loaded gun. "No," I said quietly. "They depended on erasing me." The call ended without another word. The night air outside my truck was still warm, but inside the silence crackled with energy. Each breath felt heavier than the last, like I was exhaling years of tolerance. Tolerance for being told I was lucky Rowena put up with me. Tolerance for watching my name vanish from every plan I paid for. Tolerance for sitting in the corner while the family toasted over steaks I bought. I wasn't done. Next up, the venue. I pulled up the manager's number from my emails, thumb pressing with calm determination. My hand didn't shake this time. She picked up almost immediately. Mr. Dorsey? I'm calling to cancel the event scheduled for tonight. Dorsey Retirement Banquet. She hesitated. Are you sure? The ballroom's in use right now. I'm very sure. I booked it. I signed the contracts. I paid the deposits. You'll forfeit the remainder, of course. I don't care. Her breath hitched just enough for me to hear it. I could picture her now glancing toward the grand entrance where the name Harlan Dorsey was etched onto the welcome board, assuming he was the one behind it all. That's how it always went. They took the credit, I took the cost, I canceled the florist next, then the band. I worked my way down the list like a man cutting power to a building, one breaker at a time. With each call, I felt less like a victim and more like someone finally stepping into his own story. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was clarity, pure and cold. My phone buzzed just as I hung up with the band manager. A new message. Rowena, don't embarrass me tonight. Sit down and be quiet. No greeting, no apology, just another command, as if I were a dog barking too loudly during a family dinner. I stared at the screen. So it wasn't a mistake. Not the missing seat, not the tone in her voice, not the laughter. They meant for me to stay quiet, meant to leave me standing. Meant to pretend I didn't build the whole damn thing. I reread the message, let the words burn. Don't embarrass me, as if I was the embarrassment. I leaned back in the driver's seat and whispered to the windshield, not tonight. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about years of being tolerated, not accepted, smiled at, but never really seen. I imagined the ballroom again, the way it looked when I toured it alone. Bare walls, empty floors, no flowers, no lights, nothing until I filled it with vision, detail, and care. Now, all of that was dissolving. One phone call at a time. A part of me wondered how far this would go. What they'd say. What they'd do. Maybe they'd blame me for ruining Harlan's big night. Maybe Rowena would scream, maybe even cry, but they never thought twice about what it felt like for me to be erased from it. They left no seat, and now they'd have no service. The band's confirmation came through, cancellation processed. I watched the message blink on my screen. I closed my eyes and exhaled, not out of relief but readiness, like a man walking out of the fire, not burned but finally dry. Let's see how they laugh without music. The first sign was the waiters leaving the room, trays still half full. No one noticed at first. The laughter was still rolling, the music still humming gently in the background. But then one of the guests, a cousin from out of town, lifted his hand for another glass of Chardonnay, and there was no one to bring it. Rowena stood at the head of the room, raising her glass toward her father. Her voice rang out with practiced cheer. To Harlan Dorsey, she said, chin high, eyes glinting, the man who built not just a business but a legacy. Applause followed. Flashes from cell phone cameras. Harlan, seated beneath a balloon arch with happy retirement in gold script, gave a tight smile. His eyes drifted to the side, distracted by something behind the cheer. Another server had slipped out the double doors, apron still on. Across the room, small pockets of confusion formed. Plates weren't coming out anymore. Bread baskets sat half empty. Champagne flutes remained unfilled. One aunt leaned over to whisper to her sister, pointing at the buffet table. No new food had been added in over 20 minutes. It's probably just a delay, Rowena said, laughing a little too hard, waving a dismissive hand. Let's keep the party going, right, Dad? Harlan didn't respond. His jaw tightened, and he glanced toward the entrance again. Still no staff returning. Behind the murmuring guests, near the wall where Luther's chair should have been, the empty seat sat untouched. Someone had moved it earlier, closer to the hallway, as if even the furniture knew it didn't belong. The room's energy began to shift. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses clinked more cautiously. Even the band, which had been playing mellow jazz, slowed to an awkward, uncertain stop. Then came the twist that cracked the room open. The catering manager, young, flushed, visibly sweating, slipped in through the side entrance, approached Harlan directly, bent low, and whispered something. Not low enough. We've been instructed to stop service, sir, he said. The contract holder canceled. I'm sorry. Silence. Not just hush, but dead silence. Even the sound of forks being set down seemed loud in its own way. Harlan's back straightened like steel. His eyes, already narrow with unease, sharpened to a point. He turned to Rowena, slow and deliberate. What does he mean, canceled? Rowena's smile faltered for the first time all night. She gave a little laugh, high and thin. It's a mistake, Dad. Probably a mix-up. I'll fix it. She pulled her phone from her clutch and turned away before he could press further. Her fingers shook, though she tried to hide it. In her chest, something had shifted. Something ugly. It wasn't just a catering mistake. She knew. Her pulse raced. Guests leaned toward each other now, whispering names. One said Luther, like a curse. Another said, I told you he was going to snap one day. Some looked toward the door, wondering if he was still in the building. He wasn't, but it didn't matter. His presence, his silence, it weighed heavier than if he'd stood and screamed. Rowena clenched her phone tighter. Don't embarrass me tonight, she had texted him, smug and certain. And yet here she stood, caught in a spotlight of confusion with no music, no food, and a growing storm of side eyes. Harlan rose from his seat without a word. The weight of his stare sliced through the air between them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. You said he wasn't involved, he murmured low enough for only her to hear. You said you handled everything. I did, she lied, heat rushing up her neck. He's just trying to ruin the night. Seems to me, Harlan said, his voice gravel. He already has. And with that, he walked off, toward the hallway, toward the side exit. The guests followed his movement with their eyes. No one clapped anymore. No one cheered. And that empty chair near the restroom sat quiet still, a symbol of what had been ignored too long. They had pretended Luther was invisible. Now he had made them feel the cost of pretending. Rowena's fingers trembled as she scrolled her phone, looking for his name. She turned toward the exit and began walking faster. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. Didn't explain. Her heels clacked on the tile like warnings. The double doors swung open and she stepped into the warm night air, scanning the parking lot, and there he was. Luther, standing beside his truck, arms crossed, face calm. Too calm. Rowena's heels clicked like gunshots on the pavement as she marched toward me. I didn't move. Just leaned a little deeper against the truck door, arms crossed, watching her cut through the dim parking lot like a storm in heels and glitter. Her lipstick was still perfect, but her eyes, they'd lost the smug shine. Are you proud of yourself? She spat before she was even 3 feet away. You humiliated my father in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what you've done? I let her words hang there. She wanted heat. She wanted me to match her fury, to meet her at the edge of chaos. But I'd already walked through the fire tonight, came out the other side cool, calm. What I canceled, I said evenly, was my own humiliation. You planned this night without me, remember? Oh, give me a break, she scoffed. I told you to handle the details. That's what you're good at, handling things, logistics, grunt work. It doesn't mean you get to hold the whole family hostage because your feelings got hurt. I let out a short breath, half sigh, half laugh. Grunt work. That's what my time, my money, my planning meant to you. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. You made a fool of me, of my father, in front of everyone who matters. I didn't flinch. Funny, you didn't care when they made a fool of me. When you did. Her face twitched. Just a flash, but I caught it. Don't act like you're some victim, she hissed. You never belonged in this family, Luther. You were always temporary. You just didn't see it. And there it was. The slip. The truth. You were already phasing me out, I said slowly. This wasn't about a missed name tag. It was about erasing me from the picture. She faltered. We had to start making choices. Dad's retirement was about legacy. And you complicate things. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the folded paper I'd printed this morning, not out of paranoia, but because I'd started learning to prepare for her moves long before tonight. I unfolded it in front of her. Texts, screenshots, one from her sister. Don't worry, once he's gone, we'll fix the seating plan. Another from Rowena herself. He won't even notice. He's too used to being in the background. Her breath caught. The words were right there, black and white. You weren't counting on me paying attention, I said. You were counting on me swallowing it, again. She lunged, trying to snatch the papers. I stepped aside, calm as ever. Her hand barely grazed the edge. You're pathetic, she muttered, eyes wide now, more cornered than angry. You think this makes you powerful? Torching your own marriage in a parking lot? Marriage? I asked quietly. You sure that's what this is? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. That chair inside, I said, nodding toward the banquet hall. That empty one shoved near the restroom. That told me everything I needed to know. You don't want a husband. You want a background prop. Something that doesn't talk back when you rewrite the story. Rowena stood frozen, eyes darting between me and the truck behind me. I could almost hear the calculations behind her stare. Damage control, spin, maybe even lies she'd already started rehearsing for inside. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. I reached for the door handle, paused, and looked at her one last time. Her mouth trembled now, just enough to show the cracks had reached the surface. Now, I said, voice even, it's my turn to set the table. And I climbed into the truck, shut the door, and pulled the engine to life. She didn't follow, didn't yell, just stood there, framed in headlights, blinking hard like someone who'd finally realized the rules had changed. And I wasn't the one losing anymore. By the time I walked back in, they were already tearing each other apart. I didn't storm in or make a scene, just pushed the banquet doors open and stepped inside quietly, the way someone might return to a house already burning. The air had shifted, no longer filled with polished toasts and smug grins, but with frantic whispers, darting eyes, and a rising stench of panic. A waiter moved past me in a rush, carrying a tray still half full of untouched shrimp cocktail. Another followed, balancing champagne flutes, some barely sipped. The food was being pulled mid-course as if someone had suddenly called time on the charade. At the front of the room, Harlan stood tall, well, trying to. The same man who'd smiled so wide earlier now had a pinched look on his face, like he'd swallowed something sour and was trying to make it look like steak. "Who signed off on this?" he barked, voice raised. "Why are they pulling service?" No one answered. Then a woman in a black vest, probably the banquet manager, stepped forward, arms awkwardly folded over a clipboard. "Sir," she said softly, "all contracts for tonight's event were filed under Mr. Luther's name. We were just informed of a full cancellation by him." Gasps rolled through the crowd like a breeze before a storm. My name hit the room like a dropped plate. Sharp, unmistakable. I didn't say a word, just stood there and let it sit. Rowena turned slowly, eyes landing on me like I was a ghost, come to collect a debt. "You did this?" Harlan demanded, stepping forward, his hand gesturing wildly toward the emptying tables. "You think this is funny? Ruining my night?" I met his eyes. "You ruined it yourselves. I just stopped pretending." Silence. A woman near the gift table whispered something to her husband. Another guest pulled out their phone, probably texting the rest of the family not lucky enough to witness the disaster in person. I caught the word lawsuit float across the room. Rowena, red-faced, pushed past a cousin and made a beeline for me. Her voice dropped low, cold and sharp. "You think you've made your point?" I looked at her without blinking. "No, I think I finally stopped being yours to ignore." She took a step closer. "You embarrassed this family in front of everyone." "No," I said calmly. "You did that the moment you erased me from the table and thought I'd smile through it." Harlan looked to Rowena. "Is this true?" he asked. "You left him out?" She didn't answer, and that silence said everything. Then came the twist that cut deepest. Not mine, but his. Harlan's voice wavered as he looked around the room. Every vendor, every dollar, was tied to him. His voice cracked, not with rage, but with something worse. Realization. "And you didn't even think to ask whose name was on the contract?" Someone else muttered. They thought he wouldn't say a word, like always. I stayed quiet. Let the weight of their arrogance finish what I'd only started. Rowena turned back to me, trembling, not from fear, but the realization she had lost control in front of the only people who ever mattered to her. "You think this makes you powerful?" she hissed, desperate to claw back some version of superiority. I didn't even raise my voice. "No, this makes me free." Behind us, a staff member quietly walked across the hall and lifted a single chair, one that had sat alone all night in the back corner, untouched. the same chair they'd told me wasn't mine. He folded it and carried it out without a word, like removing a piece from a game that had just ended. It was that image, not the chaos, not the missing entrees or the silent music, that stuck with people. That chair, the one they denied me. Rowena took a shaky breath, and for once, she didn't speak. She didn't know how. I walked past them, through the crowd, past the wide eyes, the stares, the hidden smiles from the few who might have understood. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. At the door, I paused, just enough to say, "This isn't the end. The bill always comes due." Then I stepped out into the night, the sound of unraveling pride following close behind me. It arrived the next morning, when lawyers and creditors came knocking. I was parked across the street from the Caldwell house. Same old truck, same black coffee in a dented thermos. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, but the tension in the air was already thick, like a storm that forgot to check the forecast. I sat quietly, engine off, window cracked, and watched their carefully curated world come undone in real time. The first car pulled up at 8:07 a.m., a dark sedan with government plates, law firm no doubt. Then came a white delivery van from the catering company. 2 more vehicles followed. By 8:15, the front porch looked like a courtroom waiting for a gavel. From where I sat, it was almost elegant, watching the weight of truth pull at the seams of their silk-curtained home. Inside, I could only imagine the scramble, robes still on, coffee cups left half-filled, and Rowena probably screaming before her feet even hit the floor. Sure enough, not 10 minutes later, the front door swung open and voices spilled out like steam from a busted pipe. "You said it was handled," Harlan's voice thundered. "You told me he wouldn't dare." "He wasn't supposed to," Rowena snapped back. "He was never supposed to have that kind of control." Another voice, unfamiliar and clipped, broke in. "Mr. Caldwell, ma'am, this isn't about control. These contracts were filed, signed, and backed entirely under Mr. Luther's credentials. Without his financial liability, your events, and quite frankly your reputation, don't hold legal ground." A beat of silence. Then the louder cracks started. Raised voices, footsteps stomping upstairs, someone knocking over what sounded like a glass vase. I took a slow sip of my coffee. Bitterness never tasted so clean. At 8:40, the band's manager showed up holding a folder. By 8:45, a man in a beige jacket, collections agent probably, rang the doorbell 3 times before letting himself in, like he already knew there wasn't much time to waste. From my truck, I saw it all. But I never moved. Inside, I imagined Rowena pacing like a caged animal, blaming me for everything, screaming about betrayal, trying to hold together the house of cards she spent years pretending was concrete. But the truth is, I hadn't knocked it down. I just walked away from the table and stopped playing the game. At 9:05, I hit send on the email I'd drafted the night before. A simple note, blind copied to every vendor, planner, venue, and associate tied to the Caldwell family's orbit. Effective immediately, I am no longer affiliated with or financially responsible for any events, contracts, or obligations under the Caldwell family name. Any future correspondence should be directed to the appropriate party, Luther Allen. And just like that, the last tether was cut. No fanfare, no speech, just a man stepping out of his own shadow. I could picture it, Rowena reading that email on her phone, surrounded by shouting voices and unpaid bills. The one person they counted on to stay quiet had finally spoken. Not loudly, but clearly enough to be heard. A few moments later, the front door slammed open again. Rowena stood there in yesterday's heels, robe tied too tight, phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline unraveling. She looked across the street. She saw me. I didn't wave, didn't nod, just watched. A few seconds passed before she disappeared back inside, and I knew right then that something had broken. Not a plate, not a lamp, something deeper. A few minutes passed. Then my phone buzzed once. Text from Rowena. "Please come back. We can fix this." I stared at the screen. No anger, no gloating, just a strange sense of peace, because I finally understood. They erased me from their table, so I erased myself from their story. I set my coffee down, turned the key in the ignition, and pulled away, slow, like a man leaving a house he didn't build, didn't break, but would never walk back into. I never replied to her text, because by then I had already chosen freedom over their table. A week had passed since the night everything cracked wide open, but the silence that followed was louder than all their shouting combined. No more calls from Harlan barking orders, no more long-winded explanations from Rowena, just me and peace. I was sitting in a quiet diner just off the highway, a spot I hadn't visited in years. Red vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like burnt toast, and sunlight slicing through the dusty blinds like it had a purpose, the kind of place you walk into and nobody asks questions. I'd been up since 5, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my body hadn't fully caught up to the stillness. After so many years of being on edge, waiting for the next jab, the next slight, the next silent dismissal, waking up with no one to prove myself to felt like stepping onto a floor that didn't creak under my weight. A waitress with tired eyes and a kind smile approached. "Waiting for someone?" she asked, nodding toward the empty seat across from me. I smiled gently and shook my head. "No, just me." She nodded without judgment, poured my coffee, and walked away. No pity in her tone, no curiosity. Just the kind of grace that comes from having seen her share of broken folks trying to patch themselves up over black coffee and burnt eggs. The paper on the counter next to me rattled as I shifted. Headline read, "Local business mogul faces lawsuits amidst financial collapse." That would be Harlan. Rowena had moved back in with her parents 2 days after the fallout. Word was spreading fast through their circle. Some blamed me. Others whispered that I'd finally done what no one else had the guts to do, hold up a mirror. I didn't celebrate their chaos. That was never the point, but I won't lie. Watching them squirm under the weight of their own arrogance felt like breathing clean air for the first time in years. You see, it wasn't about the party, it was about a pattern. Years of being smiled at in public and dismissed in private, of making sacrifices no one remembered, keeping secrets no one honored, and biting my tongue until it bled. They taught me what it means to be erased, and I taught myself what it means to be seen. That diner booth became more than just a resting place. It became a reminder. That chair across from me, empty, yes, but not a sign of loneliness. It was freedom. It was the space I reclaimed for myself. A seat I chose, not one I had to beg for. I reached for my cup, lifted it gently, and gave a small toast to the vacant spot across the table. To the seat they never gave me, and the life they never thought I'd build without it. The waitress passed by again and gave a polite smile, noticing my gesture but not asking. I appreciated that. Outside, the early morning traffic began to hum. People going places, chasing things. I had nowhere to rush, nothing to chase. For once, I wasn't trying to fit into a world that never made space for me. I paid the bill in cash and stood slowly, not because I was tired, but because there was no hurry anymore. I wasn't rushing to prove a point. I wasn't bracing for another quiet insult disguised as concern. As I stepped outside, I glanced back at the booth. The chair remained empty, and yet it didn't mock me, it honored me, because now I understood something they never did. Some chairs aren't worth fighting for, some tables aren't worth sitting at, and some names, once cleared of other people's shadows, shine brighter than they ever could before. So tell me, have you ever walked away from a table that never wanted you there in the first place?